right, I'd like to call to order the board meeting. I'd make a motion to adopt the agenda as mailed.
Second.
Aye. Alright, we are going to discuss the ever-changing COVID guidelines as they've changed, or we have gotten a lot of direction since even our board meeting last Wednesday from the Kansas State Health Department and the Kansas Association of School Boards, et cetera, so rather than not meet, we decided we needed to meet, just to make sure that we're all aligned and go forward the next steps. As everybody knows, we put in a temporary mask mandate for this week. As of last Friday, we had almost 8% of our high school students at a positive rate, which gets us very close to the 10% school has to shut down for a couple of days. So the decision was made to put in a temporary mandate. Obviously, it was prevalent in all of the schools. The highest percentage being in the high school, to help with the contact tracing and everything involved with having to deal with the rising cases as this Omicron variant is, widespread, as we all know. So I think I don't know who wants, if you wanna go.
Lisa, I was gonna just turn it over, kind of have you talk about where we're at.
What would you like to discuss first?
Where are we at today compared to how we were?
Okay. You want numbers, the building, or rate, positivity?
Sure.
So, last Friday when we met to discuss the temporary mask mandate, we had 28 positive cases in our district. And as Kelly indicated, that was a 7.8% positivity rate in the high school. And that was a major jump from the 13th, which we only had 19 positive cases. And when we reach that 10% threshold, that is considered an epidemic and that is reportable to the Kansas State Department of Health and Environment. And then we would get direction from them once we reach that 10% mark.
Okay, Lisa, clarifying question as you said that, so the 10% is when we have to report, like no matter what school you're at? Okay, and there's no change from KDHE related to, hey, now we've changed the COVID guidelines of, after 5 days and you don't have symptoms or they're lessening, now you come back, which in my mind could increase the number of positive because we've changed how we're doing things, but the 10% hasn't changed.
Not to my
With that.
knowledge, I have not been informed of that.
Okay, thank you.
And then as of yesterday, about 5 o'clock, our current positivity rate is 27 active cases. We did have a major drop in the high school percentage with only 7% or 7 positive cases versus the 18 last week, and that's because those students were able to return under the new KDHE guidelines after the 5 days.
And then after, I think when we talked yesterday, you mentioned the 27 that were out actually dropped significantly by Monday.
Yes, we will have 15 positive individuals returning back with us by Monday. And again, that could be due to the 5
The
day
shortened days.
versus the 10.
So it's very
Yes.
very small in comparison and obviously spread pretty more evenly
Throughout
versus
the buildings.
a high concentration. Okay.
So is that 10% by building then? That's not our total overall,
We have an option to report per building, but also because we are connected, all of our buildings, we have the option to report district-wide.
In this last week, they put in KSDE along with Kansas Health Department, put in the option to suspend contact tracing for 30 days, starting on Tuesday the 18th. That's when that So there was some guidance given on that. Some schools are doing that just because, and that's one of the reasons that we had such a problem last week, is taking so much time to contact trace. It was just, I think that
That's like-
spent all day doing that.
all
Several
day, all
days.
weekend.
All weekend.
Contacting parents,
So-
going over their options, whether they would like to test or stay home, or if they are possibly exempt from testing due to previous infection in the last 90 days or vaccination status. A little bit of data, last week, with all the individuals that were tested, only 3 positive cases were determined here at school with close contacts being tested from the classroom. 3 people from the classroom that we identified as a close contact tested positive. And there was a total of 101 individuals altogether, meaning household members as well as close contacts within the school, and close contacts that was not a household member or not in school. Like if you spent the night at someone's house and an individual was positive, you'd be considered a close contact, the blue section of your guidance.
Thank you.
So basically what you're saying is the kids aren't giving it to one another here at school, they're getting it from outside the school.
There's really no good way to determine it, but the data indicates that is correct.
So 3 out of how many?
101 individuals were tested
And
altogether.
that were close contacts identified in the school?
No, let me look here.
That's what I wanna make sure I'm understanding that right.
That's how I understood it, so.
So that would be like 3%,
It's 3%.
okay.
Which is really small in comparison to the amount of hours you're putting in.
Right.
Doing all the tracing, the contact.
Very minimal amount, yes, in comparison.
Cause some of the guidance did say with the suspension of the contact tracing that it could be more of a second grade, be on the watch out, not second test the way I read it, like, as I was studying all this.
Would allow us to notify.
You would be
Based on
able
a
to
group.
notify groups in larger scale versus individuals, so parents are at least more aware to watch for symptoms.
However, I do feel that, if parents and guardians would get a text message every other day, they may not acknowledge that and they may ignore that. I think that everyone in society needs to be mindful of, if you feel that you have symptoms, just stay home and contact your physician for further guidance.
Not using the school as the testing ground to ensure if you are sick or not. I mean, the reality.
Yeah.
Because we're not a testing
We're not
ground, we're not a clinic. But we have put things in place to help minimize
Yes.
our risk and to help keep the kids in school, so,
And that's the goal.
and that obviously is always our goal, 100%, is to keep the kids in school. Just a reminder for everyone, because sometimes I don't think everybody remembers that. As we're having these conversations, that's always in the back of all of our minds.
I mean, I think that's where my mind was headed when I looked at all the numbers and percentages yesterday. Was, hey, based on the amount of hours putting into it versus the low percentage of individuals that were actually saying, yes, you are, we tested, you are positive from our process. And I don't think we should continue, and especially with them saying, hey, we are giving you this grace period. That's just where my mind is going.
I think
we
that
do suspend
KDHE recognized that there is an issue with testing supplies, staffing and time, and it is exhausting. And maybe they have data that also indicates that the chance of transmission in the classroom is extremely low compared to household members that are possibly returning after day 5 on day 6. Maybe they want us to shift our goal to detecting positive individuals that are returning from home versus the classroom setting, since there is a lower risk of those individuals.
So Lisa, in that case, with this grace period, in that case, would we shift to only testing return from homes?
That
It
in
is an
my
option,
mind makes the
I
most sense.
don't even,
I'm looking at our testing supply, I'm looking at our
That's
limited
what,
staff. And if we would take away the blue and pink section of the
Right.
current guidance and suspend it for 30 days as recommended by KDHE, I think that we would be able to provide testing for household members that are returning on day 6 through 10 versus if we would continue the way we are, we will run out of supplies very quickly. And I was informed that the order that I attempted to place last week for supplies will not even be considered until the end of next week.
Lisa, on the contact tracing that we're doing and the notification, what is our requirement for contact, for notification as far as do you have to make a call? Can it be a text? Can we, I guess what I'm saying is, can we still do some level of communication to those parents and say, hey, your kid may have been exposed, again, maybe at a broader level. Please keep an eye on them over the next few days, but we're not going to continue to test them and run them through the protocol like we have. I think we still have an obligation to try
Yes.
to inform people, but maybe we figure out a different way to do that isn't as cumbersome for you guys.
I agree. I do feel that if there are changes made, you know, a district letter will go out district-wide to inform parents of what we're doing, and it will have, you know, very cut, clear guidelines for parents to monitor. And we could send out a case with 12 text message or email to classrooms as there is an exposure. But again, it will probably be multiple a day if that is something we would like to do. We can.
Do we keep track of the exemptions for somebody that was positive for like, it would be exempt for that,
So
say in the last 90 days?
So the conversation is, you know, if that is part of the contact tracing when I'm on the phone with a parent or guardian, my first statement is I introduce myself and then I say that their child has been in close contact with someone in the classroom that has tested positive for COVID-19. And I ask them if I can ask them a few questions, and I ask about their previous infection, and if they say yes, then, you know, we will follow up with documentation for that.
So do we know where we're at in our school, like percentage wise of kids that,
Are vaccinated and exempt from.
yes,
That is information that parents do not have to share until it is needed. So no, that is not an accurate number at this point because I am positive.
You haven't contacted every single parent?
And they do not have to share that information.
Right.
But you have a set of data, it's just not a complete set, is that correct?
Correct.
Right,
Okay.
Correct.
And where are we with what we have? Do you have any idea as far as a percentage?
Bring that with me, but I can certainly get that to you.
Just curious.
So essentially during this time, and obviously we'll continue to reevaluate because that's what we do during this, is just trying to understand the recommendation and getting to the point, you know, try to make sure we're all aligned and understanding what are next, and then obviously what the administration has to think as well. So what I'm hearing, we would continue to test individuals returning on day 6 from a household positive.
the recommendation was to test once. Or
To
you could only, instead of
Okay,
testing day 6 and 6 through 10,
We can choose what we do.
Can choose what you do from
If
there.
we do it twice, if we do it once. I will share with you that last week from board meeting to this meeting, testing those household members returning on day 6 was a 59% positivity rate. 16 out of the 27 positives were household members returning.
so that's really the
So I think that we did
majority
our
by
job.
far.
we
busy.
did what the testing program was supposed to do, we identified those students and staff members that were returning, and then they were sent home.
So then they stay home for the 5 days, assuming symptoms relieve, and then they can come back on the next day 6. And now they've had it, so that you don't test them
They're exempt
anymore, they're
For
exempt,
90
okay.
days.
So we wouldn't, so there, and then we would remove the 6 or the 1 to 10 day, starting on the pink.
Oh, okay.
Let's start on the pink, start on the bottom. If you're considered a close contact at the school, that's what the pink is. Right now, prior to all of this new information, we were testing day 1 through 10 and wear a mask.
Every other day, yes.
Every day, every other day, thank you, every other day. So that would go away,
Under this guidance from KDHE is a 30-day suspension.
is a 30-day suspension. We discussed how do we communicate versus doing was Johnny in PE for 15 minutes next to Sam. It would be 2nd grade or whatever we decide. Please note, we had a positive case in the 2nd grade. Parents, please be extra diligent, kind of communication. Just a thought, just throwing that out there. If anybody violently disagrees with these thoughts or has other ideas, please talk.
What kind of form, in the email form then, would that be the, I
I'm assuming the Swift Reach, the text or the email.
I have access
think
to
that
that.
would be appropriate.
I think just the question that's going on in my head is that do we do it for each positive, or is it, hey, if there's a cluster of 3 or something like that, that's maybe when we reach out, so it's not every single time?
Then you're
No,
not
just
getting
a thought.
50 messages in one day.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, it's
You
just.
could,
So, how many kids are we sending home a day because they have symptoms? Because that's what's gonna trigger our close contact tracing, right?
Yeah.
So if we're, I mean, that's, I don't see it being multiples a day, maybe I'm just thinking it wrong, but kids here with symptoms that trigger the process, that number is not gonna be as high as it was when we were doing contact tracing and
Testing
testing
every
people
day.
and finding new
Every
ones and then
Well,
contact
that's true.
tracing that
That's
and so that number should be significantly smaller.
yes.
Okay.
And as far as symptoms, they vary so much. I've had people test positive and they only had an ear infection. Or,
It's
you know,
crazy, it's crazy.
it's small headache. So as far as treating students in my office, I don't call parents unless the student is not able to function in the classroom or their behavior is very out of character for them.
But in this case, to add on, so they exhibit symptoms. We're not testing you to see if you're positive because you have symptoms. You would
Not
go
at this
to
time,
your
no.
medical doctor.
Yeah.
If need be, the symptoms persist, get tested, and then you would be then alerted. So really, you're only getting alerted in that case
From parents.
from a parent notification to then send out the alert. So it's different than when all the kids are testing and then you'd be sending out the alerts.
The other scenario that would come into play there is if we would continue to test the household members and
You
they
find
happened to be positive and they were in the classroom the day before, I would have to notify.
yeah, and okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
So if you're testing them on day 3 of their days back and you get a positive at that point, then you would do the
Yeah.
notification.
because they sat beside each other in a block schedule for an hour and a half
Okay.
or in the same
Yeah.
cluster of desks.
So if we do a more generic FYI parent type of communication, do we think grade level is the right?
Or classroom, I don't know.
I think you'd have to go classroom, I mean,
You don't think grade
But
level? I think they interact so much.
Honestly, at the elementary school, I would say classroom,
yeah,
possibly grade level, but at the high school, middle school, that's gonna change, I would
I
think,
don't know,
because there's 7th to 8th
because
graders,
they have
right?
block scheduling and it's running Wednesday and
it also depends on, I mean, if we don't have enough subs and you're splitting classes between teachers, like that is happening, then, I mean, that all changes it.
So
But
it really
I
goes
don't know.
down to parents watch your kids. If they exhibit symptoms, keep them home. So maybe we're just being over, I mean, cause in middle school, I imagine it would be middle school, maybe seventh and eighth are combined and then sixth.
It just depends on what class they're in.
Well, and then you have junior high going over to the high school for classes and
Or TAs coming from the high school.
TAs going to elementary, I mean,
We're one big happy family here.
Alright, well, maybe I do like just one large communication. Like kind of a
We
one-time.
could do that, again, like on a percentage basis, like we decided to put the masks in place because we were at the 7.8% in the high school. We could just do, a building, if we see numbers increasing in a particular building, we could
That's a
do a
good idea.
communication.
And what percentage would you be comfortable making? Okay, so let's talk about communication in a second. Let's keep figuring out what we wanna do. So, no more testing of individuals exposed outside of the school district, is that what I'm hearing during this time? The blue, so they're returning day 6,
If they are not exempt from,
or do we still, I guess I'm getting confused of that, we're not contacting tracing or we're not testing,
so
it's,
the blue section would be just a parental information for me. Hey, my kids spent the whole weekend with grandma and grandpa, and grandma tested positive today, they were just there yesterday. They're considered a close contact. Can we do some testing?
for the, during their return,
Their
after.
return, and that was being done every other day.
Do we just test on day 1? Upon their return?
What do we see as a percentage of them coming back positive? Is it
0.
0?
I was leaning towards just the red and yellow, was all we could really do from the testing.
Well, in red, you don't even test.
Yeah.
It's really yellow.
Right,
That's, I mean, I'm fine with whatever you guys all, whatever.
Yellow's the highest, by far the highest percentage that we have.
Most certainly.
so do we
yeah.
need to make a motion just to say that we're gonna go away from contact tracing and start there? I mean,
I think so.
That's
I
fine,
mean,
For the
until we discuss again.
We're essentially
exemption
suspending-
period that's been defined by KDHE.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because
And
we're
it's not
following their
30
guidelines.
days because the exemption period started on January 18th and today's the 21st, so we don't have,
Well, we can just
Let's
say,
start.
and we'll
So-
discuss again at our board meeting, cause it's the
When?
12th,
it's the 12th,
yes,
so
I believe, let me,
we could exempt it
Yeah, that's
until our
right.
next board meeting, our next
It'd be the
regular board
9th.
meeting.
the 9th, thank you, I was on the wrong month, January was the 12th, I'm sorry.
We could do it until the regular board meeting
Yeah.
and then go from there.
Okay.
I make a motion that we exempt the starting over. I make a motion that we temporarily suspend contact tracing from now until our next discussion through February 9th.
Can we amend that to
Thank
include
you.
testing, the testing that goes with the pink and the blue in our
Yes,
current plan? So we would not test
do that all.
on those 2 blocks as well. Second that.
Aye.
Aye. So, yay,
Communication.
communication.
I think for us to sit here and decide exactly what's gonna work in every case is, we're gonna be here till midnight.
Okay.
I would personally think that, I mean, I trust you guys to understand what's happening and what's going
The
on
level
in-
of
at
communication
at
needed.
your level and, yeah, and make the appropriate communication. That's, I don't know that we need
No.
a specific direction for you on that unless
Well, and
somebody
I
else
think
does.
they already kind of drafted one, that I think you sent out several days ago, there's already like a draft communication that's kind of presented by KDHE too, that I thought was really informative as a parent.
For
and
the
then-
changing of
I
the,
don't have a copy of that.
yeah. I'm
Well, I
talking-
think
we're
it
talking about
says
the
it's the
computer stuff.
expectation for parents and potentially exposed children, those bullets underneath there.
Yeah.
Was a clean cut way, I agree, Kat, just consider your child. No.
This is so ever changing, we've gotta be fluid with it.
We have to be fluid, that's
I
right.
think that setting out some guidelines that, I think education for the parents is probably about as key as anything for them to understand what they should do to help out, like setting out that bulletin would probably be.
We could possibly put out something like we do for our activities, we could put it on the webpage and leave it like if there's a second grade
Oh.
positive,
Like a dashboard.
and leave it on there for 5 days, and once that 5 days is up, just like when they would come back, you can take it off.
Like a scroll, like an ESPN
Just like
score
our
scroll.
current, our activities deal for the high school and middle school, if we just, Lisa could update that each time. Just,
Versus, right,
and
in
that could just be another thing and then if we have a lot of communication that needs to go out, you could do that also, but that could be like a more generic thing. So people could look at that. And
Okay.
that's not hard to update.
So we'd do that, like
So let's say there's
USD
a,
420 wide, or would it be
well, let's just say
for
there's
the elementary, junior high?
3 in the second grade, so second grade, be aware there's some positive cases and it stays up for 5 days. And then as soon as that 5 days is up, you take it down. And then you know that you're past that window probably, just like when they'd return after day 6.
on day 6, yeah.
But that would be updated daily then?
She
Yeah.
could update every time she has something.
Is
on.
that
We just put
easier
cases
than
down.
contact tracing and calling parents all night long?
Most certainly.
So you'd have a by grade ticker then, or?
Yeah,
You just put COVID update like our
It'll
COVID
be like
activity.
CNN or whatever it's down at the bottom, it just keeps moving. That's a good idea, Mr. Reeman. All right, so I think the only other quick thing, obviously, the masks come off as of Monday based on the communication last week. I was going to at what point though, do we want to make a call that if a school gets to such a high percentage, that's almost the decision we have, is that okay? How do we make, or?
We've gotta figure out a way to give our admins and our nurse the flexibility to respond to what's happening
That's what
without
I'm
all
thinking.
of us having to jump through hoops to make it happen. And I think that's where what we've gotta figure out is what level of, you guys can implement a mask mandate, you guys can close the building down, we don't know what the scenarios are gonna be until they happen, and then it's.
And the
it's
decision
too
needs to
late.
be made pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I think that's my thought is that we need to give them the ability to respond, and then we've got to support.
One thing, we're gonna try to keep the doors open as
Sure.
unless we can not facilitate buses, food service,
But we've got to
teachers,
keep a safe
teachers.
environment,
Right.
we've committed in our vision to a safe learning environment for our students, and you guys have the ability to see moment by moment where that's at.
Right. Recommendation from yesterday on Dr. Watson's. You can, they talked about using up to 40 hours of the remote or using your snow days, but you gotta watch your 1,116 hours.
So really though, to make that, so that's kind of where I was going, Todd, I agree that I want, we need to have some guidance in place for them to make that call. And in my head, I'm a numbers person every day, that's all I do is numbers. So in my head, it makes sense to me, if we get to a positive count of X% in a building, we need to do something to stop that so we don't have to shut down or, get to a point where
So is that number 5%, 7%, 10%, we did something at what,
7.8.
7
almost
the other day, yeah.
8%.
I think that's a fair number.
Which
Talk
one?
about intervention,
7?
8%.
8%, if you hit 8%,
In
the
a
prevention measures,
So you're saying 8% gone now because of I mean-
positivity rate.
Positivity is not gone.
I don't know how the admin feels about
But-
that absentee rate, but the
So-
only thing that I'm concerned about is positivity rate.
Go ahead, what was your question?
Well, what I was saying is positivity rate, they're gonna be gone. I don't remember 2 years ago when you had influenza and you had 8 students gone out of one class.
You know, the difference is when you get to 10, that's when it's an epidemic.
Well, I agree with that, but
But it's not being gone, it's literal positive.
But that has always been the case, whether it's chickenpox, influenza, we do monitor that. I am in close contact with the secretaries. You know, that absenteeism, and if this parent calls in and say they have tested positive for influenza, I do, for 12 years, have monitored that number. We have never reached that epidemic percentage.
What about close? Have we gotten to 8% in year
Yes.
12? So when, and would it be by build versus doing an entire school building versus what we did?
That's what I'm leaning towards, because otherwise we would need to do the 8 or 9% across the building, so it's like however we decide what that 10% is, if we decide that that's by building or if it's the entire district.
And it would be 5, not school days, it would be the 5-day
Calendar.
calendar days. So on Thursday, we get to 8% in the middle school, we make the call that the next 5 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, so Friday, Monday, Tuesday at school, the kids would wear masks. Is that what we're saying? I'm just throwing that as an example.
So is the 10%, is that a state of Kansas percentage, or is that just something we're pulling out of the air?
That's
think
what has been recommended to us by the health department.
Okay, I'm just
No, that's
clarifying,
Yeah,
you know, that we're not just picking numbers.
We're not saying, this sounds like an epidemic.
So we're saying that 8% in any of the buildings, building by building, we would throw in a 5-day, we would authorize the administration to implement a 5-day mask mandate, being calendar days, not school days.
I don't see how you can, I don't see how you can do that. Mandate, if we're gonna mandate it, then our school needs to spend the money and go, the N95s that are suggested, because in all reality, all these masks we're wearing does not count for that.
I don't know if those are accessible or not.
Well, see, and that's
Yeah, but-
what I'm saying, so basically what we're saying is, we get to that 8%, even if they're all coming from home, because we're not doing it, say it happened in that 30 days, we're not doing that contact tracing, correct? They all came from home, none of them was transferred, school by school, then, the mask. We have positive cases now, people wear masks, so,
Well,
chances of hitting that percentage is going way down
Right.
because of the
Absolutely.
change here. The chances of getting that 10% now is gonna be very unlikely because of the changes you just made here.
and it could be a different intervention besides a mask.
Mhm.
We could try to social distance more, if that's a possibility.
Which is
We could-
hopefully something that we need to continue to do, even though it's
Absolutely.
difficult, obviously. Jay, did you have something?
I did. Based on what you're talking about now, the 8% number, what was the number again that was
Just a second.
here? The number that was here last week that put this into place was less than 8% already, so why was the mask put into place last week?
It was go ahead, it was at 8%, well, 7.8% at the high school.
Right, which is below the 8% you're talking about now, that's what I'm asking.
That's
That's
your
your
question
question is.
behind us, we're moving forward.
Lisa just recommended 8.
So it wasn't just me,
No, I'm just saying, as we discussed it.
it was admin.
Contact tracing was, talking to county health, that if you had double mask, the contact tracing was not obligated.
leave the air conditioner on.
And that's what we were running into so much trouble with, is contact
It was
tracing.
completely about the amount of time taking to contact trace.
It's,
So we have,
Okay, so
yeah,
do we,
where we at?
and where are we at? We got We have made a motion and approved and passed that we will continue the testing the household members when they return on day 6.
So now it's just the whole, what do we authorize?
And now the authorization authority given to the administration to implement any sort of mask mandate or precautions, interventions, thank
Up
you.
to and including, we've already given them the authority to shut down if they need to.
At the 10%,
Well,
correct? Isn't that what we did at the last meeting?
no, because we were also talking about if we were short on teachers or we gave them just a
I think if they're at their last
you guys make a
resort.
decision and we'll support it, and I think that's.
So I
if
mean,
we
just
can
from, I'm curious from an administration perspective, I know you guys have all sorts of meetings. You know, is there like 8% that was, you know, brought up, is that also what you guys are thinking? Have you guys come to an agreement, hey, what would it be for us to potentially do this again? Or still thinking through it because it's all continues to change?
To go to a mask mandate or to shut down school?
Either, I shouldn't have you guys have had those discussions of, hey, as a team.
For us,
here,
it's
what do
just,
you-
well, I think we've talked about the entire time trying to keep our doors open.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's
the
more about
focus.
staff than students when it keeps the doors open. When we talked about the face mask, it was only
Happy birthday wishes throughout the Kathy.
about the contact tracing.
Logan Faker, whose birthday's on Saturday.
And so I think as long as we have staff,
Today for lunch is fish
our
sticks,
doors open.
macaroni and cheese.
I mean, that's how I see it now. That could
and
change.
chocolate chip cookies. Activities for today,
You're
there
gonna
will
watch
be the
your- I
senior
mean,
class
what's your
meeting in the library at 3:00. Seniors, please make sure that you bring a pencil.
Just a second.
Wrestling will travel to Rock Creek today. Dismissal time will be at 12:45. Leave time will be at 1:00. High school basketball will continue with their tournament, the Flint Hills Shootout Tournament at Emporia State. Girls will play at 6:00. Boys will play at 7:30. Leave time for the game will be at 3:45. The high school band will be
6
after
o'clock
school
and
to load the
7:30
van
spots.
and bus
That
to
was a
travel
lot.
to Emporia to play for the
It's
team.
nice.
Good luck to all the teams today. On Saturday, wrestling will travel to Holton. Their tournament time will start at 9:00 in the morning. Good luck for that. Want an easy meal for Super Bowl Sunday? Order a pulled pork, cheesy potatoes, baked beans, and dessert meal for $12 per meal, or place a family order for $50. That will feed a family of 5. Orders are due by February 4th. You can order through any of the students going on the biology trip, or see Mrs. Dunbar to place your order. Also, any students who sold trash bags for the biology trip fundraiser, you need to stop by Mrs. Dunbar's room after school today to get your orders picked up. Liz DeVaul at Riley Hahn, you need to make sure that you return your checkout Chromebook to the library at this time. Also, yesterday, we had a very high number of students checking out day loaners for Chromebooks in the library. The reason was not charging Chromebook. Make sure that you charge a Chromebook at home, as these Chromebooks really need to be checked out by the students who are having issues with their Chromebook. Not being charged is not a good reason. Queen of Courts voting is open until 3 p.m. today. We will announce candidates at that time, so make sure that you get in and vote. Dance team members need to stop by and see Mrs. Camarina today. Thank you and have a great day.
Okay, Tyler, you had a question. Do you remember your question?
No, I was basically just asking the other administration what they thought. I mean,
we all have the same goal, just keep the building open as long as possible, as long as we can staff it. We had a couple days there where it's pretty close, but I mean, we're getting through and our other staff stepped up and helped out. But I think, we all think that's what's best for everyone. No one wants to go remote. No one wants to close the building down and miss snow days or whatever else, so as long as we can keep the kids safe and keep the building open, that's what we want to do.
Randy, did you have a question?
So just kind of on my behalf and a few parents I talked to, I just wanted to, didn't get to come to the 12th meeting, but just to kind of clarify and jump on what Kat was talking about and you guys were discussing about when you authorized the things that you did. So I knew, I got the phone call about the mask, like, a lot of us did and everything. And I'm just out of curiosity, I have a couple of things that kind of they all go together. And I'm not sure who may be able to answer it, so whoever, just feel free to jump in. Who was it? I watched it quite a few times just to verify. Who was it that made the official decision for our, like our students, our staff, you know, our district to be in masks for Tuesday through Friday of this week? Like who made that decision? Cause I knew, like, I watched the meeting.
So this is outside of the board agenda, so we can't really answer it.
Okay, and I just wondered that because I wasn't sure if there was like a motion or my main question on that, if there wasn't something to that, was if there was a motion or a resolution that was passed that authorized administration outside of where, because I knew that they were authorized for non-contact days shut down, you know, whatever, if that was needed. And for testing supplies and things like that, I didn't hear anything about masks. I mean, I went back and watched it and made sure multiple times. But I didn't hear anything about that, and I wasn't sure if there was a motion or resolution that was passed authorizing administration to be able to enforce the mask mandate. That, I don't know when that was or when that vote was taken, and if that was, when.
Yeah, so on our agenda is talking about masks going forward,
Right,
not what the decision that was made last week. So
okay,
I don't really have any comment or can comment on that.
okay,
So
but there wasn't
the decision was made to keep our doors open, and that's the decision that we made.
there wasn't like an official vote taken for it though?
No, administration made a decision, try to keep,
I'm sorry, what was it?
administration made the decision to try to keep the doors open through the mask.
Okay,
Okay,
so I think,
okay.
do we need to make a motion for the?
What did we decide?
What did we decide? I'm getting pulled forward for Super Bowl.
I mean, in my head, I'm going back and forth on, you know, the 8%, is that right? No one knows what that right
I
now
know.
is. And if that gets us to the next board meeting to say if we, to see more numbers, right, from week to week, if how are things changing now, the close contact moving, the testing.
Do we just pause on it?
I'm good with that.
Okay, I'm good with pausing on any mass decisions between now and the next board meeting.
What is your preference? Is it to get guidance as situations come up, as you need, or make the decision, or what would your preference be?
Well, sometimes it's hard to get a board meeting together if we have to make a decision in a quick,
In a phone call manner or whatever, I mean, you need action on the spot just to get an opinion, or?
Ideally, it'd be great to have board approval, but sometimes we just don't have time for it. I mean, if we have,
I think the problem that I see that comes up, that you guys are living in the thick of it. By the time I have an opportunity to read my emails and get myself educated on it, the problem is already, you know, most of a day old or perhaps over a day old, so.
Or the direction from KDHE has changed.
Yeah, they've changed their ideas, so I think you guys need to have the ability to be fluid and make decisions, you know, within reasonable parameters to do what needs to be done. Now, I don't know how that, we make that an emotion or whether we just have that as an opinion, but.
Yeah, that's where I was going. They are living it. They need to be able to respond to it. And then if we need action from the board, then we can call a board meeting and do that in the time it takes to get the board meeting set up properly and legally. But
Yeah, and I think maybe I didn't explain myself very well, so I'm okay with the 8% going up to the board meeting. And then let's revisit to say, hey, but how did those numbers, did we have to go and, you know, do a mask mandate for a couple of days? I'm okay, I just didn't wanna do that permanently. I just wanted to see like, okay, we've got a couple weeks, if that's what we
Up
have
to
to
the
do to
board
keep the
meeting.
doors open, great. But then let's revisit at the board meeting. That's just my own personal.
Meaning, between now and the next board meeting, if we flag at the 8%, put it in,
So they've got some guidance, so we're
or
not just.
temporary.
or a temporary,
Lisa,
Yes.
on the email that you have, the number that's given under the high school, what number would be the 8% threshold?
It'd be the 18,
19.
19.
18 was 7.8, so one
19.
more would put you over.
That's out of how many high school students?
213.
How many?
213.
Because there's no contact tracing and we're only testing the people coming back from the household members, I'm not sure even at the 8%, it makes sense to put in a mass, I don't know, cause we're not even, I don't know. I'm going back and forth to just pause until the 9th. I mean, I think if we get it back up to around 8%, we probably need to have a meeting and discuss what to do.
I think we ought to pause and just wait. I mean, if we have to come and have another board meeting, then we gotta do it. I mean, that's what we gotta do.
I think that there's just such polarizing opinions on masks. You know, this.
There are?
This.
That is shocking.
This current variant, you know, masked, not masked, testing, not testing, you know, vaccinated, not vaccinated, it's going to spread. It just is.
Well, the rest of the world is pretty well done with the masks, so, wherever they go, wherever they are, that's where it's coming from, obviously.
Yeah. And we can only control it in between our walls
Our
here.
walls.
As soon as they step out,
It's community.
it's,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and no
Yeah.
disrespect, but we had 2 junior high basketball games here Wednesday, and I know some people wore masks, but there was a large majority that did not wear a mask anywhere in the building.
Yeah, it'll be that way tonight at
You
the
know,
basketball tournament.
so-
Yeah.
On what our expectation was at that game, and I know trying to do that, I don't have time to police all that, run a tournament.
You guys
too.
aren't mask police.
The only thing I could do was, we requested our students and staff do it, not anyone else, just our students and staff, and even that didn't happen.
But what I'm saying is if we implement a mask mandate, how's that any different than what we expect the general public to do when they're inside our building?
Right.
When they're from the outside bringing it in, we should have the ability to police it and enforce it, but if we're not, then how can we do that to our students and staff that are in the building every day?
Well, I know when we talked about the mask thing, and it was completely about the rule of not having to contact trace 2 people that are face masked.
Yeah, the numbers.
That amount of workload, that amount of time it was taking, and then the positives we're getting from that contact tracing was taking more kids out of school. That's the only thing we wanted to disrupt, to
And
lower
that's
the
going away.
numbers,
Yep.
to see what our numbers did. And now they've dropped, and I think, we're back to a good state. So it was simply about contact tracing and
that-
finding more positives in the building just accidentally, because they happen to be sitting in the same room. So it wasn't about stopping spread, it wasn't it's good or it's bad, they're approved masks, not approved masks, just the rule about contact tracing.
So it's more of a numbers game with the masks.
Correct.
And it always has been for some time, as
Lisa,
numbers and masks go together, so.
Lisa, are you clear on the directive based on
We're
everything that we
suspending
talked about?
Until we meet again for the board meeting, contact tracing in the school as well as testing outside contacts. We're not testing the blue and pink. We aren't testing outside contacts or contacts within the school.
All right.
We decided no mask mandate,
Right.
good, okay.
All right. I motion that we adjourn.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Lisa, I have your.